what I'll be doing is sort of setting the stage for the others that come after me, my betters, who are experts in their fields. And what I will intend to do in the first 30 minutes or so is just take you on a journey sort of across the board in terms of what we see at AvidThink on network transformation. All right? So just a couple of words on who AvidThink is. And as Dan indicated, AvidThink is a research and analysis company. We provide research and advisory services. We cover infrastructure technologies. So we don't do the optical and the RF stuff and the spectrum stuff. That's beyond us. But anything above that, from an infrastructure layer perspective, all the way up to the application layer is something that we do touch and we do cover and we like. And we've been doing this for the last 7 years as part of SDX Central. But as of end of last year, we spun out and we're now completely independent, which means we work with various publications. In terms of key topics that we look at, cloud containers, SD-WAN, which everyone likes and hates at the same time, because it means everything and means nothing, right? But it does solve real-world problems, right? And so that's why it's so hot. And then SDN, the venerable SDN that started this whole thing, back in the early sort of 2011, 2010, that we don't talk about anymore because it's not cool. But yet, underlying a lot of the network transformation that we see today is SDN or SDN principles, as you'll see, right? And of course, NFV, there's been a lot of talk about NFV, about how it's great, about how it's transformers, about how we've not achieved the goals we set out to do in the last 7 or 8 years, about why it's too bloated, why it needs to be lean, why it's got a wrong approach, and so on and so forth, right? And then you have ONAP, OSM, right? All the different orchestration things, which are sort of the next wave of discussions around NFV. And then you have Edge, 5G, and IoT. So all these elements, and we'll talk a bit about each of those, are elements of network transformation. So unlike most other people, I'm not going to try to define what network transformation is, because you always see a slide that says, what is network transformation? I'm not going to do that, because fundamentally, there's nothing new, and yet there's always change, right? We've been transforming. We were transforming when we went from, SS5 to SS7, SS6 to SS7, right? We were transforming, we went from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5GE and then 5G. Right. So we're always changing. Sorry, that bad joke. Anyway, you can get 5GE here, by the way, near the airport. It's yeah. It is a little faster. I've benchmarked it. Anyhow, I shouldn't. We've gone from centralized to decentralized and back again, right? And so, as we transform, we go from the old rotary phones, which probably, all our kids have no idea how to use, right? And you see those videos on YouTube where, faced with that, they have no idea what it is, to, sort of the press, the touchpad, all the way up to, new devices, and then I have no idea where we're going to go next, right? But we're always transforming. And so network transformation isn't necessarily new. It's an ongoing. But what it is in support of what we need right now as businesses. So network transformation on its own makes no sense, because what are you transforming for? Well, you could do it because it's cool, right? I'll just do white box because it's cool. It's better than the pink box I have right now, or the gray box I have right now. But that's not sustainable, and that's not useful. So it has to be in support of business transformation, or what is now known as digital transformation, or if you're cool, you can use the word DX. I have no idea what DX means, right? But it is transformation of a business to support the new needs, right? And fundamentally, there are changes. We are more global. There is a lot more competition than there is before. The internet, the cloud infrastructure makes things hyper-competitive, and you have to keep up. It allows you, at the same time, if you keep up, to scale like you've never been able to do before. And so as we build these layers of technologies and create new abstraction layers, right, and we are able to replicate at scale these things, there is value in transforming your business along the tenets of agility, speed or time to market, efficiency, scalability, right? And to do all that with insights from sort of a data-driven approach, right? We talk about all of that. And so it's required. And if it's required, then the infrastructure underlying that has to transform. And that is why we do network transformation, and that's why we've always been doing network transformation. Right? It's not necessarily new. We're talking about sort of the same thing. I mean, 10 years ago, someone would be sitting on a different stage and saying, we're going through a transformation, it's all new. The reality is it's not, right? But every time we transform, there are different principles, there are different things to look at, because the way we innovate is by creating new abstraction models, new Lego bricks, if you will, right? You create something the first time, you sculpt it from clay, oh, it looks great. Then you take a look and say, well, I think the arm is a module, the left arm is a module, the right arm is a module, the left leg is a module, the right leg is a module, the torso is a module, and you modularize it. Why? Because then you can replicate it at scale with the appropriate quality. And if you modularize stuff, then you can innovate. You can say the left arm sucks. I'm going to improve the left arm, right? You know, Adva, you work on the left arm, right? Nokia, you work on the right arm, right? Ericsson, you work on the left leg, right? And you innovate, but fundamentally they'll tie together through APIs or interfaces that we come up with, or the MEF comes up with, right? And it should all work, right? You might end up with Frankenstein, but it's going to kind of walk, right? But that's what it's about, right? It's about modularity, it's about abstraction, and that's what we'll see in network transformation. Now, because there are some smart people in the world who can look at transformation across all domains. Some people can look at it across a wide swath of, sort of different, domains of control. But the reality is that most of us can only do one thing at a time and focus on one domain at a time. And so when you look at network transformation, yeah, there are certain principles that we'll see shortly that span the gamut, right? They go across everything. But a lot of the transformation is going to happen by domain, and different domains may face different problems. Different domains have different amounts of innovation with regard to the specific technologies in that domain. And so those elements are what will drive transformation in each of those separate domains. And there's a lot of domains, right? I just picked a couple here that we're all probably very familiar with, right? We have data center, right? And data center is like, are you talking about the enterprise data center, or the cloud data center, or the service provider data center? Well, guess what? A lot of it's looking a lot the same nowadays, right? Maybe different scale, right? But very similar. So that helps us. Looking at the campus, what's happening in the campus? We haven't heard about the campus for some time, especially as a service provider. You don't talk about campus for the most part, maybe, right? Except you were trying to manage a campus at some point. But what's happening in the campus? The enterprise edge, which is a really cool and hot place to be at the same time. The service provider core. The transport networks, right? Our access networks. What's happening, with the backhaul? What about the SP edge, the remote edge, the deep edge, the far edge? I have no idea, what they're talking about in marketing, but fundamentally, it's probably about base stations, right? Are we going to transform the base stations, and what is needed from infrastructure at those locations, and what do we need from the network in those places? But aside from a domain-by-domain transformation, there are some principles, and you see the speakers talk about that in a lot more detail. And we'll talk a bit about these, and we'll have the experts actually go into this in a lot more detail later on. But fundamentally, we're seeing increased modularity as we figure out the key elements that solve problems, as we figure out how to tie these little Lego bricks together. As the yellow brick comes to light, or the red brick or the blue brick show themselves, right? We modularize, right? Because that's how we build systems. Because we can only deal with one module at a time, and allows us to innovate each module on its own, allows us to scale, replicate, get the quality that we need. Software defined, or SDN. Those principles are pretty much common across the board. Whether you're talking about sort of cloud data centers, whether you're talking about transport networks, or even campus networks, the principles of disaggregation of the different layers, right? The control plane, the data plane, right? The management plane, centralized visibility, right? And some kind of programmatic or API access to the system pervades everything. We just don't call it SDN anymore. We've stopped SDN washing everything, which means it's no longer clean, but I don't know. But fundamentally, it's still there. It's just hidden. We don't talk about it. But it's okay. Don't be embarrassed. You can say the word SDN. It's fine. Right? We're among friends here. Anyway, so speaking of SDN, it's everywhere. The other part is disaggregation, right? So we looked at the monolithic systems of the past, and we say, let's break it down, because we think we can innovate better. Just like we did with the PC or servers in the past, maybe we can do better. But at the same time, while we do that, there are other new problems that come up. There's new value, but we also have to worry about how do we re-aggregate, or who re-aggregates? Because in the end, you still have to ship a system. You still deploy a system. The next one, it's another overhyped area. It's intent-based. What does intent mean, right? There are different definitions, but fundamentally, the goal here is to not be worried about sort of this step-by-step, programming of a network device, but to say, look, this is what I really want you to do, and you're smart enough, so go figure it out, really, right? And then I call it AI/ML assisted, machine learning assisted. I didn't put the word autonomous networks up there, even though it's a really cool word to use, because, we might get there. But in my discussions with people a lot smarter than I am, I think AI-assisted, AI-guided, I think that makes a lot more sense for the time being. I don't think we're at a spot where we're ready to turn over controls of a global network, to Skynet, the AI that sees all and knows all, right? But we'll get there step by step, right? The other element that I see in network transformation is security. Security is coming back into networking again. I think, when we built the internet, ARPANET, security wasn't necessarily one of the key things. Resiliency was, but not necessarily security. And now we see security sort of trying to be baked in everywhere. And it's easier to do it early than not. And so we'll see what happens with that as we progress. But fundamentally, security needs really to be there, especially in this day and age that we live in, where every government wants to sniff our traffic. And I don't know for what, but my traffic's not interesting. At least I think so. But security is an important part of it. The other element that I'm seeing in network transformation, when we talk to the service providers in particular, is this service centricity. So not worrying about infrastructure per se and looking at all the different pieces, but looking at it from a service level abstraction and innovating within that service. Right? And that has the benefits of aligning it with a business element, or a business element that people will purchase, right? Because you purchase services, you don't necessarily just purchase a network, you purchase services on top of that. And so that abstraction in thinking has been helpful. The way that we are looking at orchestration and doing sort of service by service, and then doing sort of multi-domain across those services can be helpful. And again, these are ways by which we can make things manageable, because fundamentally it's very hard to break everything apart and then try to pull it all together and make it all work perfectly. We seem to be a lot better when we break it down to chunks and innovate within those restricted chunks, and then figure out interfaces by which we tie them together and how we orchestrate those pieces. Right? And I think that's what we're learning. They're all virtualized. NFV is happening. Yes, it's a lot slower than maybe some of us expected. Yes, it's not so cool anymore. But it's still happening. We have to go virtualized. There's no question about it. There are benefits of doing so. Yes, it is a little harder than we thought, but we'll get there. The other thing that's important is, despite what I say about sort of service by service, domain by domain innovation, enterprises or even service providers are looking for sort of end-to-end, sort of domain spanning, right, controls, right, visibility. Right? And that's yet another element. And that's why in the transformation, clouds or multi-cloud or multi-location needs to be sort of part of that. And you'll see that as well as we talk about, or as the other speakers talk about orchestration. You see this multi-domain, cross-cloud, this magical thing that we'll achieve, right? The other element is programmable, but again, programmable by whom, for whom, right? Open question. It's important. It helps us innovate. It helps us innovate without bothering Cisco. Well, I don't know, or Juniper, or Nokia, or Ericsson. Pick your favorite, or Huawei, right? Oh, that's a bad. No, never mind. It's okay. But yeah, that's supposed to put power in the hands of the service providers, or power in the hands of enterprises, so that you can make the system do what it wasn't originally designed to do, but it has little bricks in there that you can do it. But not everyone can program a network. I think that's what we've learned. It's not that easy. Right? And then finally, we're in the data-driven world. Data is important. Telemetry is important. In network, in band, whatever it is, but fundamentally, we know telemetry is important. And how you use the telemetry for assurance, so for AI guidance, right, all that's important. So as you listen to all the different talks through the 2 days here, I mean, you'll find, this is not buzzword bingo, by the way, right? That's not intention. But you'll find a lot of these terms being used over and over again, I'm sure. Right? So, just a couple of words. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because others will. But if you look at it from the enterprise perspective, right, what do you see? Well, on the data center side, there are things happening as part of network transformation. Converged Ethernet, for instance, keeping things simple. I'm not going to say InfiniBand is dead. I'm not going to say that NVLink is gone, or OmniPath, or everything is gone. But a lot of people prefer a simple Ethernet fabric. A lot of people like to manage and use the same tools, the same troubleshooting tools, the same things, for one fabric. And if you can make it lossless, and you can add intelligence to it and run RDMA over it for your AI workloads or your big data workloads, why not? Right? It's one fabric. So there are elements in there that are sort of changing. Disaggregation, white box continues, right? Maybe not at the rate we thought everything was going to transform, where all of a sudden you pull out all your network switches and all of a sudden white boxes go in, but it's still happening. Cumulus lifts, big switch lifts. In fact, it looks stronger this week at Dell World, right? Picker 8 lifts, right? I mean, so they exist, and white boxes exist. I mean, within the data center. Smart NICs, again, we figured out that we needed more speed. We figured out that the servers couldn't handle network loads, and maybe CPUs were not ideal for dealing with network loads, and so we say smart NICs. But that breaks the abstraction of what is a standard server, but maybe we just redefine what a standard server is, right? But again, we have no idea how to deal with smart NICs because, again, smart NICs has multiple approaches: FPGA-based, NPU-based, ASIC-based, right? GPU-based. Right? Why not? NVIDIA, bought Mellanox, right? So there must be something there. Right? So, but one of the other elements is you'll see this intent-based thing, and I think we'll see a lot more of that just because the data center has gotten a lot harder to manage, in the core. And then I'll talk about the campus briefly. In the campus, a lot of it's Wi-Fi, and then we've got 5G, but Wi-Fi is at Wi-Fi 6, so it must be better, right? Faster, right? Stronger, whatever. But we're seeing convergence there as well, with Wi-Fi and campus switching, so they're getting converged, right? And then on top of that, a layer of, and this is something that we don't talk about enough, which is identity, role, attribute-based security, because again, it's got to be secure, identifiable, right? You got to know sort of who's on your network, and that problem exists. All right, so moving on. Enterprise edge, what do we see at enterprise edge? Well, we see SD-WAN. Do a search for SD-WAN, and you look at Google Trends, that the words just, what does it mean? I'm not even going to try to define it. SD-WAN is anything you want it to be on the edge. But what it does say is that we do have an edge problem that enterprises have had. They're looking to consolidate what they have in the branches, right? The goal here at the edge is a one-box solution that does everything. It gives you Wi-Fi connectivity. It gives you routing. It gives you security, firewalling, IPS, IDS, right? Malware detection. It gives you your SBC, your VoIP gateway, does everything. And it's one box, and it does it all, right? That's the dream. But that's in the process of happening, and you can argue who's going to win. Is it the firewall guys, the UCPE guys with all the different VNFs, right? Or will the WAN op guys win? Will Cisco win? Will VMware win? Right? Who knows? But it is changing. It is transforming. And then we move on to sort of multi-domain, right? What are enterprises looking for a transformed network across all these domains? Again, yes, everything enterprise, but by the way, I got clouds. I have public clouds, I have private clouds, you got to connect them all. It's got to work. It's got to be unified, and I want it all unified management, which a lot of people are trying to promise. We're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet. But it's in the process of trying to get there. So on the service provider side, what's happening on the core, we're moving to cloud-type architectures. It's really cool. Containers and telco, next hot thing. Actually, well, somewhere we said it like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But it's a process, right? We're trying to get there, right? We're trying to get there. Virtualization, network slicing to support 5G, right? White boxes still being considered, right? So that's what's happening. On the transport side, it's increased move to fiber. This is called fiberization is now a word, right? Yeah. Or flexible backhaul. You can call it every hall, any hall, whatever hall, right? You can trademark the term, but fundamentally it's about flexible transport on the backhaul, moving things back to the core. And likewise on the edge, right? We have disaggregation, the vRAN, the cRAN, right, all the way out to the base stations. And encryption, the need for encryption, sort of end-to-end, right? That's what's in the process of going on. And then at the edge, you have the concept of the universal CPE, right? Which is not that universal, but it's a good goal to go after, right? And again, across the domains, you'll see the same term. They want intent-based. The automation, APIs are important, scalability is important, replicability is important. You don't want human errors taking down all of your entire cloud like Amazon a long time ago. It's very embarrassing, not that great. SDN, it's still there, everywhere. It's there. You just have to look for it, right? It's not called SDN, but it's there. And then the services-based approach, right? For instance, right, service-based architecture for 5G to facilitate network slicing with a microservice architecture, container architecture. That's where we're going, right? So there's a lot of cloud centricity, cloud concepts in there, which is good for the cloud providers and something that the telcos have to come up to speed on. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. All right, so a lot of this is in the quest for fun. What we term as the fabric for universal networking, right? That's the goal. Magical fabric that spans all, touches all, connects all, containers, bare metal, VMs, public cloud, private cloud, campus, remote, edge, everywhere. And on top of that, any transport, with overlays on top of that if you want. With network functions, with telemetry, controller automation, right, across all the service domains, and then orchestration across all of that, and run applications on top of that. I mean, it's just, I don't know if the diagram's right. Different people will have different variations of the diagram. If you look at the VMware, NSX, everywhere one, there'll be a variation of this. If you look at Cisco's ACI anywhere, right, so, maybe I should call this like, fabric for somewhere, I don't know. But anyway, fundamentally, we're trying to get to this holy grail. And I'm not sure that that's the appropriate goal. I think maybe it's too much. And I think we should just stick with innovations on the per domain basis initially, get those right first. And then, we'll orchestrate across them. We'll figure out interfaces between them, as we've always had, right? The network interfaces, the ONNI stuff, right? I mean, we know how to do that, right? Let's maybe stick with that for the time being. But fundamentally, as we transform, a couple of questions to ponder, and this is by no means an exhaustive list whatsoever, right? Which is, for enterprises and even service providers, right? What do you own? What do you outsource? This is not a network transformation problem. This is a business decision, right? But it's important. What elements do you own? What elements do you innovate? Who do you partner with, right? The role of SIs is changing and becoming important, especially with open source components. What do you bring in an SI for? What do you do in-house? And then span of control. Again, you see this coming from me, which is end-to-end is very hard, right? You can run overlays and all that, but don't boil the ocean. It's not going to succeed. It's going to be very hard. Orchestrate between the businesses. Drive it by business centricity, right? Service centricity, and keep things modular. And what we found historically, and we know this, is innovation, optimization within a single domain is a lot easier, a lot faster than trying to boil the ocean. Sometimes there are people who have to rip everything apart and put it together again to make it better, right? I mean, that's basically it. But the people who can do that are few and far between, and most of them tend to fail because it's a hard problem. And so, stick within modules that you understand, innovate within those modules. And then disaggregation we've talked about, right? SDN is viewed as a form of disaggregation, NFV is viewed as a form of disaggregation. The white box movement has elements of disaggregation. So, and separating the planes for improved management optimization is certainly appropriate. But, and I have some, conversations with service providers around, we've disaggregated, and SD-WAN's hot, so we go after UCPE. We're going to disaggregate because the service provider gets the control point if they own a UCPE, right, which is important. But then if you make the SD-WAN appliance now at VNF, then someone's going to do the integration. And is it the service provider? Are you going to take on the task of when performance is not there? Is it the box manufacturer? Is it the UCPE OS manufacturer? Is it the VNF? Or is it you, the service provider, who screwed up? Right? Whose problem is it? And in conversations with many service providers now, it's a CEO level problem. Conversations with the VNF manufacturers, conversations with the OS providers, the UCP cloud providers, if you will, conversations with the Advas of the world, the Advantex of the world. All these are happening. But we'll get there because we can figure it out, because there's money to be made there, right? But that's something to consider, right? And then finally, intent, programmability, AI, ML, right, which is define intent for your needs and not the vendor's needs. What does that mean to you? How does it actually give you business benefit? Do you really need that programmability? I can't even say the word, but do you really need that, right? Do your network engineers have to understand P4 and write P4 for you to get the benefits out of your switch? Maybe. Probably 80% of the time, probably maybe not, right? It's someone else should do it, but probably not you, unless your name's Amazon, Google, Azure, right? Right. So, because it's hard. Programming. We know networking is hard. And when we first did SDN, there were a bunch of people who felt that networking was very, very simple. If I ran SDN and I could get a grad student to do shortest path forwarding, magically it would work. But as we know, right, we didn't build BGP in a day, or OSPF in a day, ISIS in a day, right? It took a while to get there. And so it's not that easy. Switching is the same thing. It's not that easy. And then moving on to AI ML, where would the data come from? Is it the right data? Is it unbiased data? Is it clean data? How do you clean the data? How do you tag the data? Not easy. Right? It's valuable, it's powerful. We have to do it, but again, right? How do we go about doing it? And it's not going to be, it's not a 10-day problem, a 30-day problem, right? It's a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, 12-month problem at least. But these are elements of network transformation, right? And these are things that we should probably look at and think about as we go forward, these 2 days. And there's going to be a lot of experts, a lot of good content sharing, and I appreciate Dan and the folks here at Lay 123 putting together the content. I think, the way I view this is it's an intimate setting. There's a lot of experts here, and then the value comes from having conversations around these difficult topics in a candid manner, right? And I think that's what it's about. So with that, let me wrap and see if I have a couple of questions. Hopefully not, because I don't know the answers. Yes, Alan. Well, thank you.
New age networking, perhaps, and fit is another one. My question is more of an observation, which I'd like your opinion on.
Sure.
To a very large extent, standards organizations, which have been with us forever, have been replaced by proprietary specs from the cloud giants, Amazon, Google, whatever, and open source consortiums. Everything you have today really is not standard. Different SD-WAN, different implementation of SDN, NFV, etc. Now that's okay for the big guys because they have enough volume to sustain a market. But what about the smaller service providers, cloud service providers? What are they going to do when they don't have to even participate in these open source consortiums? They certainly don't have the staff to build their own infrastructure like the cloud giants all do. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to fade away and the further power will be consolidated, the big 4 or 5?
So I think that's an interesting point you bring up. I would say that a couple of things. Standard bodies are very useful, especially for the underlying layers, right? So Wi-Fi Alliance, Wi-Fi specs, optical specs, things of that.
Forget that.
Those are important.
You talked about every one of your bullet points.
Yep.
They're all proprietary. Take network slicing. That's a terrific example.
Right. And
myths about that being a standard is not even close.
So,
check my website.
Right. So I understand. And I would say there's a couple of things happening. I don't think the standard bodies are gone. I think the standard bodies are trying to figure out their correct, appropriate role in this whole new ecosystem. I think some of them are trying to embrace the open source efforts and understand that a blended approach may be the right way to go about it, right? So if you look at ETSI, if you look at MEF, if you look across the board, they are trying to blend, sort of standards along with open source efforts or in conjunction with in collaboration with open source to try to make it relevant. So I would say the jury's still out. It's very possible that the standards become irrelevant. I don't think so. I think we'll come to realization that we've swung too far again, to the right, and we'll come back to the left or the other way.
To ITUR IMT 2020.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, so, yeah. I think it's a process. I think we'll realize that it's a blend, and I think that has to happen. Number one. Two. Will the service providers or the smaller tier service providers, right? With giants, will they survive? I think they will. They will adapt. Combination of using SIs or combination of adopting the open source solutions when they are in fact available, or leveraging the expertise of their providers who will bring them network service providers, the network vendors who will utilize open source to bring solutions to market. So I think they'll be okay. But temporarily, it's a little tricky as we all navigate this. And not all standard bodies will probably survive, and the ones that will evolve or are evolving right now. That's my take.
Questions on the screen?
Yes. Okay. Oh, please say more about the universal CPE. What is universal? The application to deploy is the VNS. Can you run CS?
How does that get up on the screen?
I don't know.
There's an app.
Slido. SLI.do.
Slido.
Yeah.
Good questions on Slido again.
Yeah, and I'll answer. So the first one is, it's a long answer to that. I'll let Prayson answer that one. But, I'm kidding.
We're talking about it at 2 o'clock.
So see, there was good placement, Pray. That was good placement. Very, very well done, Prayson. Very well done. Appreciate it. Now, Prayson, we've had a long relationship with Prayson. Prayson is the author of one of the articles on SDX Central that has a very long run. The one is what's the difference between SDN and NFV, and that article has been around for a long time. But anyhow, aside from that claim to fame, with regard to the universal CPE, so the goal is what is universal? So my opinion, I wrote a post that says there's nothing universal but a universal CPE. So my opinion is that there's multiple differing views on what a universal CPE is. Fundamentally, what it's about, it's supposed to be a white box that can run multiple VNFs with some kind of OS that only a few providers have today, and of which the open source is still unavailable. So Linux Foundation's Danos is still not out there, for instance. And the hope of universal CPE is that you can run, multiple VNFs and cloud-native network functions as well, supposedly, when they are available in production, that you should be able to run those on your favorite white box of choice and orchestrate it and make it work and perform and monitor it, right, at scale. Right? That's the dream. We're not there yet. Yeah, we're not there yet. Yeah. Oh. Except at 2 o'clock we will be there, and Prayson will talk about it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Adva definitely has one of the leading solutions in the marketplace for UCP OS and the management structure, and he'll have a lot to talk about that. Yes.
So I was looking at your slide where you were talking about network transformation and common characteristics,
Yeah.
and I think that most of the service providers are looking at it from 2G to 3G and 3G to 4G and 4G to 5G and so on, and the one thing that they never think about is the fact that yes, we can transfer the technology, but the thing that's always last to be thought of is how you're going to manage it. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have a big issue with the NFV, which just keeps on adding more and more spaghetti lines.
Correct.
In terms of the management. And I think that we have to start thinking more in exposure and not having the OSS and BSS systems manage everything down to the resource. Mm-hmm. We now have to expose things as a service and let them consume each other. Right. And not have the management platform right. having to know everything and how to do things, because it worked well in the past, but now with VNF and being able to do closed loop assurance and so on, the IT system that looks at it end to end don't have the knowledge. They don't have all the fast. They can't make reaction mm-hmm. fast enough, and we have to start thinking in another way to do things in terms of our our TMN layers, how we used to manage things. And I think that that's the only way that we will be able to be faster for all of the service providers. Because if we think about the MEF and standardizing how a service as a service is exposed, you know, SDN or SD1 as a service, or this as a service, and this as a service, all your domain that you were talking about that all need to transform,
Right.
as long as they just expose their services and they get consumed
Right.
across each other,
Yep.
and nothing about OSS, BSS having to understand how everything needs to be created, that's the way that we're going to be faster and more nimbler and being able to do more of an ecosystem. So.
No, I agree. And I mean, as the slides indicate, you know, my view is that you do service by service and then you orchestrate on the top, you know. But within each service, there's automation, there's management, all that. Now, whether you tie in the billing systems and what the APIs are and how do you manage all those, I think is an ongoing conversation. There are standard capabilities that each service needs to provide, right? And I'm sure we'll all work through that. But you're correct. If you try to innovate the whole thing simultaneously from top to bottom, there's just no way. The scope is just too large. We'll blow up. As we've learned. You have to constrain the problem and say, you do this one, you do this one, you do this one. And what I'll do is I'll consume you, right? So service is a service. So SaaS stands for service as a service. And you just work through it, right? But, yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll just answer this one question, and I think I should yield the floor. So if everything is disaggregated, who supports a telco? Anyone? Well, the SIs, or the telco can support itself, you know. So I think there is room for the SIs to come in, and they know that, right? Why do you think that the TCS of the world, the Wipros of the world are all so interested in all the open source, and why they're so interested in what's happening with all, you know, with what we're doing? Because they see money there, and they think that they can bring value again. Now, are you going to be locked in again, like before? Right? Is this story just like the last story? Except the components now are supposedly open source, so you could do it if you wanted, but you're not going to do it. You don't have the expertise or capabilities to do it. Well, I don't know. But what I do know is that, you know, every time we innovate, we go back and look back and say, wait, we just did that, right? We always do that, right? And again, we're always transforming. We never learn. You know, we're not doomed. We can do it much faster, bigger, better this time. But you know, maybe the same mistakes, but just better, brighter, right? In pink, I don't know, right? But we'll see. But yeah, the SIs look at it as opportunity again, which is pretty, I mean, if you look at the way IT dollars are spent, fundamentally, they do transform. So cloud was a big transformation, I'll give you that. But you look at the sort of overall spend, you know, we don't shift that much, that dramatically, generally speaking, right? I mean, it slow shifts over time, and the models repeat themselves, right? But, you know, cloud is a disruptor, and that one I would say, you know, that has real change, and we should learn from that. So with that, I thank you for this morning. I'm going to apologize. You're going to see me run out the door very shortly. It's not because, you know, I don't want to listen to the other folks, but I have commitments that I have to get to. I'll be back tomorrow. So if you have questions or you have feedback for how horrible this was, keep it till tomorrow. You know, I know, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning. So thank you. Appreciate it.